So, Mark, there are a lot of conceptions when it comes to what is a composer, what is a music maker.
Mm.
Aside from those more abstract conversations, how do you answer that question for yourself? Who are you as a composer?
I'm a human who loves music and hears things that I have reason to believe might be of interest to other humans, and I write them down so that still more humans can play them. I mean, not to be cute about it, but we were talking about this earlier. There have been over the years, certain tropes of what a composer looks like and acts like, and in the last century, what a composer's attitude towards their audiences. And I think that it's worth meeting and speaking with a huge variety of people to realize that that's not always the case.
Mm,
That, I mean, one of the great things about this orchestra is it is committed for years to people who don't always fit the stereotype either in previous centuries of, the guy with the powdered wig and the harpsichord,
hmm
or, the angry guy in the 19th century shaking the finger, or the angry guy in the 20th century shaking the finger, because we had a lot of those too. you know? And I think maybe because, I mean, in my case specifically, because I never really thought I was going to be a concert composer. I thought I was going to be a serious theater songwriter. Um, Even my path to this particular field was somewhat circuitous because I didn't feel connected as a persona, if that's what you're asking, either to Beethoven or to Boulez.
hmm
He was a great composer, but I didn't feel that his worldview was mine. And with us particularly, I thought, my God, why is this person yelling at us all the time? And making such a narrow needle's eye through which music needed to thread. Because out in the world where the people lived, and that was the world that I grew up in, the world of a thousand different genre of popular music and theater music and whatnot, it seemed to me that there were lots of ways of telling the truth through sound, which I think is the project.
How does, from your view, the conversation of new music, expanding the canon, all of those conversations, how does that impact the conversation of supporting living composers? What's the importance of the living composer aspect of the conversation from your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think that um, these terms like classical and traditional, I mean, just to kind of uh, share the way that I look at it, in some ways, I think that my approach is more traditional than most other musicians. And what I mean by that is that there was a time when, like Beethoven's time, Haydn's time, etc., nobody played old music.
Yeah.
Like the idea that you would play music by a composer that wasn't living, that you weren't actually, there was that, like Bach was writing music every single week for the church services. And so
Mhm.
by the time you get to like Beethoven's time, people knew Bach absolutely, and they played his music, but um, like they studied it, but they didn't perform it. It took Mendelssohn to be able to revive that kind of music. And then I
Mhm.
think that was sort of like the beginning of this reversal in the classical, Western European classical sphere of actually trying to preserve the past. And, and new music kind of took the left road, and then, and
Yeah.
that's what happened. But, the idea of playing music written by living composers, collaborating with living composers, and even improvising. I mean, these were things. Beethoven was a wonderful improviser. They all did that was very normal. So at some point in our preservationist view, I think things kind of got reversed. So I like to joke with people that my approach of working with living composers and, you know, a piece that was written 10 years ago, I would consider that an older piece.
Hmm.
And improvising and things like that. It's actually a more traditional view to how music was created, traditional.
I mean, the twin, prompts of this particular concerto were the Vivaldi Four Seasons, which was a piece that I hadn't really listened to until I did quite recently. And of course, we're living through an era of climate change, aren't we? I was opening the UK premiere of my opera Little Women on the hottest day that London had ever recorded. So that's the kind of thing you notice. You know?
Hmm.
So, I mean, to the extent that this piece was written quite literally out of the life that I live, it felt as direct as, the sort of song that you write at 2 in the morning, when you're alone at your piano and you're just, dealing with one, strong feeling or another. It felt that direct. But I don't feel, honestly, that there is any intrinsic conflict between thought and observation and the knowledge of history and direct feeling. So it seemed to me that the example of the Vivaldi made it, I mean, easier conceptually, although not easier emotionally, because it was very hard to write this piece. And somewhere in the middle of it, I thought, what am I doing? I'm not sleeping. It's like, really? This seemed like a good idea, to deal with all the terror of climate change that you have and make 27 minutes out of it, which means that you're thinking about nothing else for like 6 months. Really? In what universe was that wise? But anyway, but the point is that it seems to me that, again, thought and the knowledge of history and the knowledge of the way certain forms have worked are not necessarily opposed to the expression of how you feel and your desire to make that feeling intelligible to an audience whom you might expect really needs some exploration of that feeling and are not getting it anywhere else.
We have many orchestras who play, the quote unquote canon, center that for the sake of their audiences, their boards, or however we want to have that conversation. But we have organizations like ACO that are positioned uniquely and specifically toward reframing these conversations and the experience of an orchestral concert, an orchestral experience. I wonder what your, especially considering that this will be your first collaboration with ACO. I wonder what your charge is to an organization that, again, is uniquely positioned for this type of work. I think it's a different type of conversation than we would have with one of the more quote unquote traditional orchestras.
Well, I mean, speaking to my collaboration with the ACO, and this being my first one, I'm very excited for this opportunity. Um, Orchestra's terrific. The orchestra has done terrific work for many decades, and so I've seen many concerts in the past, and um, I'm really looking forward to being um, a part of the work that the ACO does. It's very important work because it's sort of when you speak to traditional versus forward-looking. artists in general. I mean, the ACO is a forward-looking orchestra. You know, the way that they view repertoire and their place in society, and the society is constantly shifting. You know, I think that in a way, you know, when one uses the term institution, I don't know at what point an organization officially becomes an institution. You know,
Hmm.
do they have to stay afloat for what, 10 years, 30 years, 100 years? I don't know, um, but the world is always changing. You know, the music that's written today is different than the music that was written the day that the ACO was formed, and so it takes a very nimble organization to be able to evolve as the world evolves, you know, with the kind of mission that the ACO has. And so to be able to have continue to do this work uh, for this long and into the future, that's really difficult. I mean, I've not started any institutions myself, but I've, you know, had the inside view on how several organizations, colleges, universities, etc., work. And, you know, organizations need to set policies and need to survive, you know, and these are, it's difficult for any organization to be able to survive in any ecosystem. And so I deeply admire, you know, the work that the ACO has done throughout the decades and at such a high level, and continues to reach out further and further and evolve. And so it's yeah, I've been an observer from the outside, so I'm really looking forward to stepping in and being a part of the team.
Classical music is new music that has endured. Period. That's just the thing. And so the extent to, you know, to a certain extent, from a certain viewpoint, ACO, with its stress on new music and new composers, is at once the most progressive and the most traditional orchestra you can imagine, because that is how you did it at Mozart's time and in Beethoven's time and in Verdi's time and blah blah blah. You know, so I mean, the innovation, I mean, the kind of commissioner club innovation of saying, look, we are already interested in trying to explain ourselves to ourselves via these sounds. Please come in to the conversation at its earliest point. That's new and that's fabulous. But the larger project, I think, in which the orchestra has been engaged is, again, you know, it is both, you know, old time religion and new simultaneously. And that's why it is such a thrill for me to be involved in this, because all the best people, you know, honestly, have been involved in this orchestra one way or another. And so it's kind of, you know, it feels like an honor as much as a commission.